In the summer of 1625, in the small town of Newcastle, New Hampshire, the Walton family was tormented by an unseen entity for 4 long weeks. What began as a tale of mystery and intrigue soon unraveled into something far more sinister. On Waiter After Dark, we dive into the chilling account. We move from the darkness of men to something truly paranormal. Join us as we explore the legend of the rock-throwing devil.
Welcome back to Waiter After Dark, the podcast. We get into all things New England weird. My name is Sean, and I'm here with my 2 co-hosts.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Kathy.
And today, we are ready to fucking rock. Is that right, Kathy?
We are. Hey, this is another episode about rocks.
The trifecta.
Yeah. Every 5 weeks, we got a rock episode coming for you, gang.
You just realized that.
I love it. I love it. Perfect timing for the memory. So we got an episode about a rock today, Kathy.
A bunch of rocks.
A bunch of rocks.
A bunch of fucking rocks.
All right, man. Let's do it.
A bunch of rocks. What would you do if you all of a sudden had it raining rocks? Literally, it would be like just on your house.
Raining rocks.
Raining rocks.
Like
Yeah.
meteors or like...
Nope, just for some reason, just rocks being thrown, dropping at your house, at you.
So many questions. Are there a lot at one time? Is it like one's occasionally popping
Random,
down?
off and on, little ones, big ones. Sometimes just random items.
What?
No, random items?
Random items.
Okay, people are fucking with me,
People
I
hate
guess.
me?
Yeah.
No?
You know, what did I do?
Well, I got a story for you. And this actually happened to someone, supposedly, back in the 1600s.
It rained rocks.
I mean, not like rain from clouds, but they had rocks coming and hitting on their house.
Okay.
I gotta hear this
Yeah.
Oh,
Talk
okay.
to us. Talk to us.
All right. Newcastle, tiny island town in New Hampshire, was founded in 1635 and spans just 1 square mile. Despite its small size, it boasts a rich and significant history. Most notably, it is the site of the first shots of the American Revolution. It's where Paul Revere's warning led to the daring raid on Fort William, an act that serviced as an unofficial declaration of the war against British rule. Newcastle's fort stood watch over the
Piscataqua.
river for 3 centuries, protecting New Hampshire from invasions from the sea. The island of Newcastle is connected via a bridge to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and is best known for its seaside resort, Wentworth by the Sea. It is appropriately dubbed on the town's website a very nice place to live. But I want to tell you about a much darker part of Newcastle's history. It was the summer of 1682. A tavern owner named George Walton was tormented by something unexplained for 4 full weeks. George and his wife Alice ran a tavern, inn, farm, brewery, and tannery, all on the same property they lived on.
Wow.
They're busy people.
Yeah.
Busy people.
Yeah.
They had 6 adult children and 20 grandchildren.
Jesus.
Lots and lots of babies.
Christmas is hard.
They had all moved out and they had moved on, and the elderly couple were still able to tend to the land and keep up with all of their jobs. George tending to the business and the land, while Alice ran the inn and tavern and made sure to keep an eye on her husband and all of the inn's guests. On the night of June 11th, 1682, George and his wife and 3 patrons, 2 fishermen and a guest staying at the inn, gathered in the tavern. As they talked late into the evening, a sudden crash shattered the night. A rock had struck the side of the house, then another, and another. Startled, they rushed outside to catch the culprit, but the darkness revealed no one. Just as George stepped forward, another stone whizzed past him, barely missing its mark. Uneasy, the group retreated inside, convincing themselves it must be mischievous children playing a prank, or so they thought. Well,
Damn children throwing rocks.
well,
Throwing children.
Yeah.
well, hundreds of rocks rained down throughout the night on the tavern. The customers, too scared to leave, took shelter within the confines of the Waltons' Inn for the night. According to the stories told, they would peek out through the windows using the light from the full moon to try to see who was throwing the rocks. But there was nothing but darkness. At times, the rock shattered the windows, holes the size of bullets clean through the glass, causing fear in the captives inside. They decided to stay clear of the windows until morning. Throughout the night, the sounds of rock parading on the taverns, ranging from the size of small pebbles all the way up to 30 pounds, kept poor trapped souls fearing what might come next.
30-pound rocks are getting hucked at this building?
Jeez.
I won't lie, when you first told me that there was going to be like stone thrown or devils thrown shit, whatever was going on, I didn't think it was actually going to like break glass. So like whatever's happening is like trying to cause harm or fear.
I mean, hundreds of rocks.
Damn.
I could throw like 5 or 6.
Yeah, then I need Tom and John.
I don't think I could throw a 30-pound rock very far. That'd be hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
30 pounds, no joke.
I'm weak.
I mean, no, 30 pounds throwing is a lot. You'd have to be really close to the house.
Yes.
Probably not
How
going
much
to do
is a
much
shot
damage.
put? Like,
Yeah, I don't know. A couple pounds, 5 pounds,
5
3
pounds?
pounds, not 30. Think, right?
I don't know.
I don't know. I don't even know how to spell shot put. I'll like Google it for you. 16 pounds.
16 pounds, so half. Yeah, they throw them 100 yards, but twice that.
Without knowing the object's shape or size or the individual's throwing ability, it's impossible to give a precise answer. However, a normal person could probably throw a 30-pound object about 20 feet.
Somebody was 20 feet from my house.
But you'd be able to see them.
see them,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
that's like me to that fucking oven.
Yeah.
When the first sign of dawn came and the sun broke the horizon, the 2 fishermen made a run for it. But the rocks, they weren't done. They kept coming. Even at the highest point in the daytime sky, the sun offered no reprise as the rocks fell relentlessly, their
What?
source unknown.
So even in broad daylight, they can't see
They couldn't
where
see
these
who
rocks are coming
these people were.
Yep. For 4 long, torturous weeks, the assault continued without explanation.
from. Is this like all day, every day too? Like,
It was like coming and going.
So kind of just that random. There was no like,
Yeah, like kind of like no rhyme or reason, really.
interesting.
And it wasn't just rocks. It was bricks, hammers, pieces of iron, pitchforks, candlesticks, and other random objects were hurled at the Walton home. Some seemed to come from the adjacent field, yet despite its wide openness, no one could spot the person or people responsible. Perhaps they were hiding. At night, this could be explained, but in broad daylight, with objects flying from a seemingly empty field, I mean, that was far more unsettling.
Yeah, it's a little more paranormal than some kids.
I just imagine like walking outside and be like, well, that's a nice candlestick. I wanted one of these. Thank you.
Another hammer, thanks.
Yeah.
The assault came in unprecedented waves, as we mentioned. Sometimes a relentlessness bombardment from all sides. Other times, just a few scattered rocks. Day or night, weekend or weekday, heavy or light, there was no pattern. And no matter how hard they tried, the Waltons never once caught a glimpse of the culprits. George was the main target of the rocks. He reported being hit over 40 times throughout the 4-week period.
Over 40 times with rocks. Like,
Poor George.
at some point, just move.
But George was not the only victim. Sometimes when locals would come to see the rocks and look at the damage that they were causing, they too would become victims, and they would be chased away from the property when the rocks would start being thrown at them. While tending to tasks on the property, George and Alice's employees began having rocks and items thrown at them, seemingly from nowhere. George and his wife, well, they tried to live their lives and they tried to run their businesses, but they were held hostage by the endless threat of being struck by objects hurling through the air. George, many times so frustrated, went into the yard and yelled to the cowards to come out of the shadows and face him man to man. This request was met with more rocks being hurled at him, till he had to take cover and run back to the safety of the house. This torment was enough to drive anyone insane.
Can I get like a dramatic reenactment from you on what that probably sounded like?
Come out, face me like a man! Come out and face me! Who are you, you coward?
Now I want you getting hit by a hammer.
Yes.
I'll get edited out, but that was
Yeah.
worth it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Finally, the torment of the rocks and other objects being thrown just stopped. As suddenly as it came on, it was done. Grateful for the reprieve and fearful it could or would start back up, they cautiously started to repair the damage done in the 4 weeks of hell they had just endured. But who was to blame? George, once the danger was apparently over, accused his neighbor, Hannah Jones, for the destruction. Hannah was an elderly widowed woman at the time and clearly did not have the physical ability to throw hundreds of rocks, some up to 30 pounds throughout the night for 4 straight weeks. However, if she was a witch and she used her powers, maybe she could. Hannah was no stranger to being accused of witchcraft, since her deceased mother was also accused of witchcraft. Hannah had lived in the area with these accusations for decades at this point. But this isn't exactly what fueled the hatred between George and Hannah. Tragically, years earlier, one of George's children was playing on Hannah's property near a saltwater marsh and got caught in the deep mud. Quickly, the mud submerged her entire body. Before George and his wife were able to get to her, she was gone. George, in response, out of grief and to prevent something like this from happening again, he put up a fence around the marsh. Hannah, livid about George putting up a fence on her property, tore it down, and this started a decades-long dispute about the land's boundaries. For years, George also wanted to buy Hannah's property, and she refused. This feud was no secret to the people of the town, and this issue was taken to the town's court several times over the years, but it was never officially resolved. The marshlands had salt flats, and salt was a lucrative commodity in the 1600s. Hannah, she never profited off the salt flats, but George, he might have seen them as a new business opportunity, and the real reason behind the big push to buy her land. So George accused Hannah of being a witch. Hannah, in turn, accused George of being a wizard and cursing her land and livestock. Hannah and George both passed away before resolving the land dispute, holding on till the bitter end of their accusations of witchcraft against each other. This claim by Hannah was not completely baseless. The Waltons did regularly host Freemasons, and while George was not a Freemason himself, he was seen as a Freemason sympathizer. A common thought at the time was that Freemasons used pagan rituals and ceremonies. Puritans in town saw the Freemasons as devil worshippers and used the occult to gain power and favor. The secretive rituals and ceremonies of the Freemasons to this day create rumors of pagan beliefs and practices of the occult. In the early 1600s, when fear of the devil and demons were a common lecture at church, these rumors were taken much more seriously. Could Hannah have used witchcraft to exact revenge on her neighbor? Could George also have practiced in the occult and have accidentally invited a demonic entity onto his property, causing all the damage and torment? If not witchcraft, George was not particularly liked in this town. He ran a tavern, brewery. He owned a lot of livestock and 200 acres of land, more than anyone else in town. And he was also a Quaker, and most town folks were Puritans. His tavern was often host fishermen, where they drank and got rowdy and took part in behaviors that were not acceptable to the Puritans in town. George also employed 2 Native Americans on his property, and to his Puritan neighbors, they were savages. This was happening several years after the end of King Philip's War, which we covered in the Bridgewater Triangle episode, and tensions were still high between the natives and the colonists. So this town seemed to have a long list of grievances with George, and more than a few reasons to want to see him gone. His differences in faith, his wealth, his acceptance of people. Puritans saw him as immoral, running a tavern and brewery. Could the rock throwing be a group of Puritans from town trying to get George to leave?
Sounds like it probably was.
Sounds more plausible than a witch, right?
Yeah, could be. Well, another theory is that George had 5 adult children and 20 adult grandchildren who were legally going to inherit his land and property if he were to die or retire from business. One article I read referenced George's will, and upon his death or retirement, his children and grandchildren would inherit the business. George, in his 70s, still ran the business, managed the livestock, the land, and one could see how perhaps if his children were getting impatient, waiting for their inheritance, 25 adults taking turns could theoretically continue this parade of rocks for an entire month if properly motivated by money and greed. I couldn't find much about George and Alice's relationship with their children or grandchildren, and I can't confirm or deny ill will or bad blood. However, it does seem suspicious to me that none of his children or grandchildren came to defend the family business or home that they would one day inherit during the month-long parade of rocks. Could the children be trying to scare George into early retirement and inherit the family business and wealth?
See, I could see that one. Yeah, that one makes the most sense so far. It's
could be.
Here's this guy, he's in his 70s. It's like, would he just fucking retire already? Like, when are we going to get our turn?
Sneaky little devils. Family coming out, taking turns, throwing rocks. Retired, Grandpa!
Yeah. I want my 200 acres.
I actually like that.
Yeah. Another theory is that Massachusetts had just separated from New Hampshire 3 days prior to the rock-throwing events. This meant New Hampshire was its own charter once again and no longer paid taxes to the state of Massachusetts. A man named Robert Mason, son of the original New Hampshire charter, tried to start collecting taxes from the colony's residents again, just as his father did. Mason had tried to restake his claim several times in the past, and without much luck. In fact, there are stories of his tax collectors getting beat up, having scalding water thrown on them, and being run from town several times. At this time, New Hampshire had 4 towns: Portsmouth, Newcastle, or Great Island as it was known back then, Exeter, and Hampton. Mason was a guest at the Waltons Inn on several occasions, and with people from New Hampshire not liking taxes, this could have prompted the Vandals throwing rocks at the Waltons Tavern. New Hampshire still refuses to have an income tax to this day, and agree or disagree, they have a long history of live free and die and refuse to pay taxes. So we seem to have a list of suspects, all with good reasons to want to scare George into leaving town and shutting down the shop, all with ample motives and access to the property in and around the Waltons' home. During the 4 weeks of the rocks pelting the house, not only could they not see the attackers, but they reported sometimes the rocks fell from within the tavern and their home. Not through the roof, but from the ceiling, almost like they manifested inside the building. Devil and witchcraft aside, this sounds much more like a haunting. They also reported hearing rocks rolling across the floor upstairs when they were on the first floor. When they went upstairs to investigate, no rocks were found. This was sometimes accompanied with what they call demonic voices, at times barely vocal whispers, other times high-pitched non-human screams. They reported one time the spit that sat in the fireplace, a 20 or so pound iron bar, flew up the chimney and several minutes later came flying back down the chimney, impaling itself into a piece of wood. They also reported hearing voices, whistles, and snorts from around the property. Even stranger, they reported on several occasions they would put the rocks that fell in the house on the table and the rocks would just disappear, again supporting the idea of a portal.
Okay, now it's getting weird. This went from like perfectly explainable to like, all right, my grandchildren want me to retire because they want my money, or like people want the tax money, to now we got ghosts.
Yeah, can we go back to when the kids just want to inherit the property? Like, I like that story better.
Unless grandma's in.
Oh, grandma's in.
Grandma's in on it. She's just like
moving rocks.
Yeah.
Grandma's like, I'm all done working in the freaking inn.
Yeah.
I want to be done. George, like, we're done. We're done.
Days on the beach.
Oh, look, the rock moved.
Well, the Waltons look to old traditions in an effort to get rid of the demons tormenting them. They boil a mixture of bent pins and urines in a pot on the fire.
What?
This was a belief from Old England that could help cleanse your house of demons or reverse a witch's curse. They reported that every time they tried this ritual, a rock would hit the pot and spill its contents.
Oh, gross. Pee everywhere.
Yep. Whatever it was, it seemed to refuse to let them finish the ritual.
I'm just like imagining, they're just, of course they wanted to stop. They're like, this grandpa's boiling piss again. Stop boiling piss, grandpa. Like, yeah, I'd be trying to stop him too. This place reeks.
There is also a story that their fence gate would be torn out of the ground and would end up on the roof. This was a feat far too physical for even the strongest men from town to complete. To me, this sounds much more like a haunting than some angry neighbor. To make these claims more interesting, during this time of the events happening in and around the house, the inn had a guest. This guest, Robert Chamberlain, was the secretary of the royal government for New Hampshire, a prominent position in the British monarchy. A very serious and well-connected man, he returned to England and wrote of the events of this day in a scientific paper. He coined the term Libolia, or rock-throwing devil, and the story was shared all over Britain and Europe as a whole. However, it was not spread as scientific paper as intended. Instead, it was sold as a writing in the new popular genre of horror. This deepened and spread the strange occurrences far and wide, but not as a testimonial as intended, rather as entertainment. A priest of this time by the name of Cotton Matters, a Puritan priest and Harvard graduate, caught wind of the story, and as all self-seeking people do, inserted himself in the story. He went out to investigate the property. He interviewed the Waltons and neighbors and witnesses. He investigated the woods and any rocks they had that had been thrown. After completing his investigation, he concluded that the house was targeted by a demonic spirit brought on by bad emotions and the feud between George and Hannah, and invited in by the unholy activity of drinking and rowdy behavior by the Waltons' guest in his bar and inn. Cotton would go on to play a prominent role in the Salem witch trials just 10 years later. He seemed to peddle in rumor and fear and eventually played an inconsequential role in the death of many innocent people in Salem, Massachusetts. Believer or self-promoting grifter, Cotton Mather's would play the bad guy in the eyes of history.
This guy's got his hands on everything back in the day, huh?
Yeah, he did Dighton Rock. He's looking into the rock-throwing devil. He was at the Salem witch trials causing mischief.
Clearly just wants to make a name for himself.
It's kind of like a 1600s version of like Ed and Lorraine Warren, except Cotton Mather's version. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, he just wants to be in on everything that's happening.
Yeah. Weird.
And very self-righteous.
Yeah, he's definitely Puritan priest and wants to, he's got his opinions on things.
Mm-hmm.
It's the devil.
For sure.
The devil did it.
The devil.
Well, there are claims in modern times of hauntings when ghosts throw household items and phantom footsteps and disembodied voices. These claims seem to go away beyond the neighbors throwing rocks and seem to match up much more with modern stories of a haunting. The fact Chamberlain, writing a specific account of his experiences and carefully weighing rocks and investigating the occurrences, endorsed the darker claims, adds credence to the story. Rocks being thrown at a house is one thing, but rocks suddenly appearing out of thin air inside the home seemed to be more paranormal. Remember, this scientific writing echoed the claims of demonic voices, unexplained noises in the upstairs of the house when everyone was downstairs. The superhuman feats of throwing the fence gate on the roof of the house, as well as the heavy iron spit in the fireplace suddenly flying up the chimney. The several minutes later falling back through the chimney with such force to stick into the piece of firewood. In the early 1600s, demons, witchcraft, and the devil were a common fact of daily life. Tragedy, the unexplained, the occurrence of the devil were often invoked to cause fear. This being said, if you believe the accounts recorded and see them through their beliefs, this could be a tale of a poltergeist. So concludes the legend of the rock-throwing devil.
Interesting.
Yeah, that took a weird turn there. I thought we were trying to figure out who was trying to run George out of town. And then, yeah, it sounds a lot more darker and demonic than I thought.
I mean, if I had to take a guess, I think it would probably be one of the earlier theories, you know?
Which one?
I probably lean more towards either the people of the town for like tax purposes maybe, or the family. I think the theory of the poltergeist, the rocks and stuff inside, I think maybe that could have come from maybe like rocks came in through windows upstairs. And so they were found upstairs and maybe they couldn't explain it right away. Maybe they just didn't realize that they come through a window. And then over the years that turned into a haunting. And so that kind of got exaggerated.
I could definitely see that. It's interesting that, who is the guy, Chamberlain?
Mm-hmm.
He wrote a paper about this and he believed everything that happened. And he tried to introduce it as a scientific paper in England, but then somebody started selling it as a horror genre.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
I definitely feel like it's one of the tales that twist over time, right? Like, especially now knowing the fact that one of the guys that was inside of the, staying at the hotel and the bar was a tax collector from Britain.
Yeah.
You can totally see townspeople getting pissed and just be like, fuck this guy, and tossing rocks nonstop to scare him maybe out of town. Yeah. He takes the story back, sells it as a horror story. All the crazier stuff gets added into it, and bada bing, bada boom, tale twists a little bit. I feel like that kind of adds up.
Yeah, that makes, and then like, the facts like rocks being put on the table and then disappearing. What does that just get added in? I mean, that part's weird.
I'm also keeping in mind that this place is a bar.
Yeah.
So people are drinking, might be adding to the events a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's sold as a horror story. Yeah, that totally could be added.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Interesting story, though.
It was a good one.
If right now rocks are being thrown at your house, what would you think?
I would think that there was someone outside. I don't think I would think that there was like demons.
I think it was the devil.
The fucking devil did it.
Devil.
Kathy, yeah, that was an interesting tale. Thank you so much for diving deep into that research and writing this story here for us. We definitely appreciate it. And Chris, any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
No, I just thought it was very well written. I'm really impressed with the research you did, and it really came across very well. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris.
And to the gang, if you enjoyed today's episodes on the rock throwing devil, you can feel free to find more of Kathy's research on our Instagram at Weirder After Dark. And don't forget, it's not just Instagram. We are building communities out there. So you can visit us and talk to us and communicate with us and other people who are enjoying these episodes like you at Facebook, Reddit, and Instagram, again, at Weirder After Dark. And don't forget, we are always on the lookout for your stories. Are aliens bothering you? Do you have ghosts? There's creepy dreams happening. Whatever it may or may not be, we want to hear your stories and be the medium and sharing them with the world. So send your stories to thegang at weirderafterdark.com, and we look forward to hearing that. And if you're enjoying these episodes, no. If you love this shit, the best thing that you can do to help support us is to go ahead and to share an episode with someone you know. And remember, it always gets a little weirder after dark.
Bye.
Thank you.